cool. So yeah, you can try to speak up.
Okay.
Just to make sure the audio.
Okay.
All right. And so what's your name?
My name is Ronnie Amiyn.
Pleasure. Thank you for coming. Really appreciate it. And can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, well, I try to. Yeah. So one of the things that I do, I am a outreach specialist for. I was about to say another organization. I'm an outreach specialist for Freedom Community Center. I'm transitioning from organizer. Freedom Community Center is an organization that exists for the purpose of reimagining safety for our community in terms of how we respond to harm and violence. We believe that the city of St. Louis is a city of survivors, and we want to mobilize survivors. We want to organize survivors to create alternatives to address the issues that we are faced with. Alternatives that are outside of the criminal justice system as it relates to addressing harm and violence. We believe that the best strategies are peacemaking and power building. Peacemaking meaning cultivating conditions that are conducive to healing, safety, and reconciliation. Having to care about what our community looks like and how we engage with one another as neighbors, and valuing one another's existence. But in order for us to sustain that type of engagement, we have to build power. We have to have a say in how we facilitate the affairs of our community. We have to have some influence about where resources go and where they don't go. So this organization aims at doing those particular things, building power and establishing peace.
Does it currently do anything around, because when you talk about building power and being able to influence the institutions and things that affect our community, you all currently do anything with education in terms of some influence over that educational system to better address and better serve the community it's supposed to serve?
Not at this current time, no. As that organization, we are kind of limited with this acute focus. So the most we do in terms of educating is educating the public, having political education, and just informing people about the systems that impact their day-to-day life and how they can impact the system so that it would be beneficial for them. So that's the extent of the education. But as far as the educational system, and especially as it relates to our young people, no, we're not in that sphere yet. No.
I mean, it sounds like it'll be powerful. It's a powerful model to then take that and talk about all the other aspects that affect our community, all the other institutions and factors that go into building a strong community, right? Healthcare, education, economic empowerment, how to make sure that we're at the table.
Yes, right? Absolutely. And another part of education that is often addressed is just the school to prison pipeline. You know what I'm saying? And for those who don't know, the school to prison pipeline is it's a real thing, and it's with the system. It's how the system sees us as a threat, as people that need to be controlled. Right? We're not really seen as human, and that's including our kids. You know, so as rather than approaching our children that may have behavioral issues or acting out or just functioning as children, doing what children do, their existence is criminalized. And the approach, rather than being corrective, is more punitive. Punitive in terms of the system and institutions and arrest and records, thereby setting them up for a pathway of incarceration. So we want to address that, of course, but that also just lends to the state of education, the state of schools, the attitudes. You know, so yeah.
And so I think we often heard people talk about the school to prison pipeline as a theory, as as a bunch of data sets, as a concept, but I think it's had an effect on your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, could you take us through your experience, like you growing up?
Yeah.
What that experience was like, and how you think that concept actually played out in your actual life.
Yeah, that concept along with another number of others. But so I want to start out by saying that there was a point in my life where I had been incarcerated. I was 19 years old, desperately seeking inclusion and acceptance in the dominant social groups of my neighborhood and our community. And a lot of times it was very negative, but it was attractive, and especially attractive to somebody who felt as though they really never had a place anywhere in life, So I had succumbed to those negative influences at 19. I went to prison. But prior to that, I had lived a life that, or experienced a life that I felt minimized, that I felt suppressed, that I felt abused. And it was all often represented within the household. It was often represented in a community. It was also represented in the educational system, in school. Like all of these places, children are supposed to be safe, And I remember in school, we were always felt, and when I say we, I'm talking about black children, were always made to feel less than. I remember a situation that stuck with me. I was like in the second grade, maybe the second grade. And I had to ask the teacher for help. And the teacher said, rather than ask me for help, why don't you ask so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so? And these were all white kids, right? So she wouldn't bother with the white kids. She would teach the white kids and have the white kids teach us. That was huge on me. And anytime there was a situation where a child needed to be addressed, the attitude was like we had done something so terribly wrong and deserved the full weight of law to fall down upon us. It was crazy, like we were kids, man. But I think that kind of shaped my mind in terms, especially growing up in Boston in the 70s and 80s, and Boston has a city with a history of racial issues. So I had experienced that, especially they had a system called the MECO system, and it was designed to bus inner city kids out to the suburban schools with the hopes that they get a better education. But for some of them townships, some of those families and some of those kids, this was a thing imposed upon them. They didn't want to be sharing space with black kids. So you had your microaggressions and to fool out experiences with racism, So that in a lot of times it was hostile. So how can we really learn and thrive in hostile environment? Or you're made to feel as though you don't belong, or you're made to feel as though you're tolerated at the most, So I never felt any place of belonging in my educational life ever.
When did you come to St. Louis?
I came to St. Louis when I was 15, and that was like the early 90s. That was 90, and that was a bad time to come to St. Louis. That was the introduction in those years that I was going to school. It was the introduction, the height of like gang activity, the birth of St. Louis gang culture. And it was horrible, man. It was so horrible, man. Some of the schools, the first school I went to was Normandy, and that was battleground. That was a battleground. I used to see battle royales and fights, and the teachers weren't invested. The teachers I've experienced. Now, there may have been some good teachers, but the teachers that I experienced weren't invested. You either just give an assignment and turn their head and go read a book or do whatever they were doing in the corner, or a teacher coming to school drunk.
Wow.
And just allowing the kids to do whatever. But I should say that I had ended up getting kicked out of Normandy because I was from out of town and I wasn't in a gang, and somebody approached me about some gang stuff, and he was trying to humiliate me, and he was trying to actually bully me, and I don't care if I'm the last one on earth, you're not gonna bully me. So I fought back, and instead of suspending the one who initiated or trying to bring resolution to the conflict, I got suspended because I decided to stand up against these bullies when it was known what happened. So I got put out of there, and then I went to Hazelwood East, and I was struggling as a student. I was just trying to find my place, and I think that I had never been diagnosed, but I think that I had ADHD or dyslexia. Like I still have a problem with reading and process information, but I know the importance of it, right? So I put an extra effort. So that means reading things over and over until I get it. But if you don't have those levels of support for a child, he disengages and gives up. You know what I'm saying?
And in school, they weren't supporting you.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. However, I didn't really know how to ask for help. So I think I want to name that. I didn't really know how to ask for help. And I don't know if help would have been afforded to me, but I know I didn't really ask for help. But it was identified that there were problems. And I remember I had gotten into a fight at school, situation that was beyond my control. I shouldn't say that. I just didn't have the tools to deal with it in an effective way.
I think for schools and being in schools for so long, you always get indications, whether it's behavior or grades. Right? Like if you're failing tests, failing quizzes, or I'm calling you to read and you never want to read, or you read and it's obvious that you struggle. Or I'm doing my job and I come around and I read with certain students and I hear, I'm like, oh, this doesn't sound fluent. This doesn't sound, and I ask you some questions. I'm like, oh, he's maybe not comprehending. Right? Or you're getting in fights. Right? That like that conflict, or that physical, conflict is everywhere in the world, right? But you don't see people throwing hands everywhere in the world. And so when you see that, that should be a sign that, hey, something is wrong. Let's do something. Let's intervene. And the idea that, I've seen schools where it's like you can have such behaviors, and people are kind of like, it's normal. It's like, okay, and so no one is actually doing anything to support, right? We know, right? There's probably a lot of things you could have done differently, but not having the tools, and also being a child, right? That's you expect that, right? As adults, I think when children come to school, we expect that they don't know certain things academically or behaviorally. Otherwise, why would you be at school? If you knew it all, right? And so I think there's a huge responsibility as educators when kids come through that door to say, hey, to identify what they don't necessarily know or have, or skill sets or tools, and to nurture that and to work with them to gain those tools so that they can gain control of their lives.
I've never felt like there was twice I should say that there was twice I felt nurtured in school. But real quick, from the story that I was about Hazelwood East. So I remember being called down to the principal's office, and instead of saying, "What do you need? How can we support you?" He made me feel as though I was being kicked out of school, even though I wasn't. Like, going back over the conversation as an adult now, I'm like, yo, he straight up swindled me out of education, bro. He swindled me out of school. He made me feel as though I was a bad kid that was being put out. His choice of words were very crafty. And so it was just about maintaining the numbers of the school, the reputation of the school. And I was deemed a bad element. So but he made me feel as though I was being kicked out when actually I wasn't. So I actually quit, not knowing I was quitting. Yo, that was huge. So, but there was 2 times in my life that I felt nurtured in school. I remember I was in the 6th grade, and I used to draw. And there was an art teacher. She seen my talent, and she spent time pouring into me. She said, "You're such such a talent as an artist, I'm gonna show your work to people. I'm gonna enter you in contests, and I guarantee you're gonna win these contests. My first one she entered me in, it was a citywide art contest for greeting cards, and I came in second place. And my picture was on greeting cards. And the second time, she says, the next one you're gonna win. And the next one I won. It was a grand prize winner, and my picture was on billboards. It was a Say No to Drugs billboard competition. And I was like, as I'm reflecting on that as an adult, she's seen something in me and poured into me. And that's what our children need, to be nurtured and cultivated, you know? So that could be academically, that can be in terms of art, that can be in various things, but the children are in desperate need of adults, responsible adults, to identify areas in which they're strong in, identify areas in which they're weak in, and address those things, pour into them, nurture them, and protect them and guide them. And I don't think that's happening right now in our community.
No, I think there's a lot of excuse making.
Yeah.
There's a ton of excuse making, whether it's, oh, these children are poor, they have challenging backgrounds, and so it's never a situation where it feels like the teacher believes that they can actually address it. Right? And sometimes maybe they are ill-equipped, right?
Yeah.
But as adults, I would expect adults to be able to at least say, hey, I need help. Like, I know this kid has a need and I can't help him.
Yeah.
Right? As an adult, but if you're an adult and you and you're in the role of a teacher and you still say stay quiet, like that's, I don't know. To me, that's not that stuff is criminal.
It is criminal. It is straight up. It's neglect. It is deliberate indifference. Like, it's crazy, man. Like, so, and we talk about accountability. We talk about accountability as it relates to so-called crime in our community, but we never really talk about accountability in terms of these systems failing our community.
Yeah, wow, that's real.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Like, why does accountability only matter in some respects and not others?
Yeah.
Right. How can you swindle a child of a whole education? Right, of a whole goddamn future, right? Because that's where education like takes you, right? Takes you on a career path, right? To do who knows what.
Yes.
But you can swindle a child out of that life, and nothing.
And nothing. I had a talk with my father, and before I even really talked about like what I discovered based off of just how I just recall, my childhood. The same thing happened to him. The same thing happened to him. And his educators made him feel as though he didn't have the capacity or the ability to thrive. He couldn't do certain things. You can only do these particular careers. You can only engage in these particular careers. You couldn't do this. And matter of fact, you don't really belong here. You can. And then my father, he succumbed to the streets, So it's historic. What happens to our people is historic, and it's void of humanity. It's void of compassion, and it's just a perpetual cycle of reducing our people.
And that's why when I try to start a school called Ali Academy, like dedicated to the greatness of every child. So you when you have a history of not even people or adults thinking like you're mediocre. I think a history of teachers and adults actually thinking either you're stupid, an idiot, or criminal. Right? They have like the most negative perceptions of who you are. And someone comes, and you have a whole community and a whole history of this. And a black guy comes along and says, hey, listen, I'm going to start a school that really just at the outset, from jump, says every kid who walks through this door is capable of greatness.
Yes.
and then for honestly for white people and for others to try to shut that idea down. I don't think they realize how deeply racist that is, because I think people really lack sometimes a sense of history, right? And the power of history. So this is not just a school for greatness in like any town or any location. You have a history where these people have been told that you ain't shit, you ain't nothing, you can't be nothing. You're not the same, right? You don't have the humanity to thrive and to live a certain type of life, right? Stick to sports, right? Stick to entertainment, right? They put you already in the box. And so if someone comes to a community with that history and says, you know what, these kids are capable of anything they put their mind to, and really believes that and has a track record of that, and then tries to put the structures in place to bring that out and to give kids and families that opportunity. And for people who are protecting the status quo here to say, no, we're not going to do that. I don't think they really understand or appreciate how deeply racist.
No, I think they understand.
Yeah.
No, I think they understand. They do understand.
Yeah.
However, it would be a huge mistake, because the beginning of our conversation, you asked about basically the perimeters of the organization that I work for. And we are part of a bigger coalition of other organizations, and we're doing work, right? But all of the organizations that serve our community should be a part of a network that serves the community. We should never be siloed. So if our goal is liberation for our people, if our goal is self-determination and dignity for our community, then we should all be connected, right? And identify every enemy, everything that undermines our community, everything that is an enemy to our community, and we'll all work, whether directly or indirectly, against that particular thing.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the criminal justice system and how it's inherently racist, and the educational system is inherently racist, and all these other things, right? Yeah. So we have our particular tracks, but we should be also working in conjunction with those who are addressing the other issues, and that issue is directly connected to this. So we may not be talking about the educational system, but damn right, that issue is linked to ours.
And you said your father experienced something very similar. Do you have peers that had the similar experiences?
Yeah, most. I'm very, like, recalling my childhood, dudes who I grew up with. Yeah. Very few of my homies graduated. That's deep. I know more people who have been incarcerated than I do know people who graduated high school.
Wow.
And then that number drops drastically when we talk about college.
Wow. And the thing, people, they talk about elections have consequences. I'm like, education has consequences. And sometimes, like, the way people act, like, just like, they're about to go to a board meeting tonight. I'm gonna see what they're talking about, but I swear when you go in there doesn't seem to be any urgency. It's not like a serious crisis that they're dealing with. And this is a whole system that has direct consequences on life. I think it's actually like a life or death proposition in many, many, many respects. Whether we're talking about students who are in neighborhoods where others don't feel as though they have economic opportunity or hope and commit violence, where they're the victim, or you have students who don't think they have any hope or economic opportunity, and they're the actor, right, causing crime and causing crime against other people in their community. And sometimes that's life and death.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't think when I go into education meetings, I rarely ever see people with that level of urgency around that work, right? It has consequence.
Yeah, that's because of how our community is viewed, because I'm pretty certain that if it was other demographics, the urgency would change. Pretty certain. We've seen it happen. We've seen it play over many times. It's the attitude that people have toward our community, but it shows of where the interest really lies, what the intention really is. And couldn't anybody tell me that you really care about crime when you're pouring resources to areas that don't address crime? And that is including education. That is including conflict resolution and community organizations that deal with the people, that engage with the people in serious ways. I was at a safety summit. Safety, I forgot what it's called, but it was the police chief, the ex-police chief Hayden. He was there. He was basically given a report card of the city, particularly the police department, and he talked about how homicides had dropped, and he said they dropped 25%. He said, but the police couldn't take all the credit. And he said something that was so profound that it was so impactful. I was surprised he said it. He said a huge part of that reduction was due to community organizations. That was huge, man. Community organizations, because the solution is within community, right? So if somebody has some type of idea or system or program that does not include community, that does not see the value in community, and they're not addressing the issues or the conditions that create the problem, then they're not really for us. So a lot of these educators, a lot of these public safety officials, if they're not concerned with the conditions, they're not. That's how we know.
I remember talking to him actually one time, and I asked him what do you think is behind most of the crime in St. Louis, and he said most of it is poverty-induced crime. He's like, I can put 10 units on the block, and there won't be crime there for that week. That those 10 units, but the crime will just move.
Right.
So I'm not solving anything. I'm just displacing crime for a temporary period of time.
Yeah.
And if you want to get to the root of it, it's about really addressing poverty. And this is the police chief.
Yeah. Isom said the same thing. We were at another summit they had last year, and he basically said the same thing. He was citing statistics and studies and everything. And so, but my thing is, if we know this,
right?
If we know this, man.
But again, to your point, that's when it just makes me think they just don't care, right? Because one of the things when you get an education, when you look at reading, part of reading comprehension is the background knowledge you bring to the forefront, the background knowledge you bring to a book, right? And so if the book is talking about an experience that you have nothing to draw from, right? It's talking about cricket, and you don't know what cricket is. You never heard of it. You have no background knowledge to bring to it to be like, oh, I understand this. Like sometimes you can read the words on the page, but you don't understand. There's no reference, right? And so we know giving kids just more references, right? Like I remember when I started teaching, I was teaching in the South Bronx. It's in New York City, and I was like, we can go down to Times Square, and the kids went crazy. They said, we've never been to Times Square. I'm like, it's literally like $1 subway ride. These children, 6th grade, so you're talking about 12 to actually 14, had never been to Times Square.
Wow.
And so
in the city that they live.
In the city that they live. And so we know that our kids don't have a ton of references, right? And so I'm like, why are we taking them on field trips and getting the speakers and filling them with references and experiences when we know, right? We know, right, that a lot of them have never traveled. Right? How many international trips are we planning and funding? How many state to state trips? It always baffles me when there's things that we know and then our actions don't line up to address those gaps that we know. And a lot of times I'm caught feeling the same thing. Oh, they just don't care.
Yeah, it's that in fear. Because a lot of this stuff is ingrained. A lot of this stuff is systemic, right? And then you have people who come from our community and they get in these positions, these public servant positions or elected positions, and they go in with the idea of changing or going against the status quo, but what do you see happen? they succumb to it. Something happens. They either get broken, they either seduce, or they realize we can't do nothing, or they just straight fearful. And the system is not designed for our self-determination. Absolutely not. And it shows on the recent I'm full blast display. The recent things that have been in the news, like for instance, the state want to seize the local control of police, right, and put it in the state. That's a huge smack in the face of them. But that's our police force, right? So they basically saying that you all don't have the ability to run it, but it's deeper than that. You're not going to run it according to how we will have you run it, because there was a change, right? There was a change in ideas and awareness, and the people was like, hold up, wait, why are we pouring more money into the police and not addressing the issues that create crime? Why are we not investing in the community if like a fourth or third of the city's budget goes into police and we still have crime? What's the issue? So people started to imagine different things, and they were like, oh wait, hold up. What's happening here? There's going to be a shift, and we want to maintain control of the people, right? So there's that. The same thing that happened with Kim Gardner. These people from elsewhere want to control how we facilitate our affairs as a community. And if there is any idea that you're going to deviate from the status quo, people get scared.
That status quo is powerful, man.
Powerful.
It's so powerful. There's so many protectors of that status quo, and sometimes like you have all these protectors of the status quo. Who's here to protect children?
Yeah.
Who's here to protect the least among us?
Yes.
Give me 1 second. Let me make sure. I'll make sure it's recording. Okay, good. Okay, all right.
Well, in terms of your question about protectors, like I'm so, what's the word I want to use? For lack of a better word, I just say hopeful. I say I'm hopeful because I've seen the emergence of individuals, initiatives, and organizations that have legitimate interest in the people, legitimate in care of the people, the things that really impact us. And there has been this emergence over, it seemed like a short period of time. For us, St. Louis, the shift was when Michael Brown was killed. There was a huge shift. So there was more intention on the systemic things, the structural things, and people working to dismantle systems of oppression or ensuring that the systems that are in place actually represent us. And it's been a long, arduous fight. People don't want to let go of that power. People don't want to change from the positions that they had in terms of their ideas and perceptions of others. But I've seen so many gains. And I believe that we have to just keep on chipping away. We have to just keep, and I'm so hopeful, and I'm so glad that I met like so many individuals, and you're one of them, bro. I'm saying we just met just a short period, and it's just so beautiful to meet people who are truly invested in our well-being. You know what I'm saying? And different. Because a lot of times I get stuck in my lane. I get stuck in criminal justice. I wouldn't want to say reform, but addressing that systemic thing and violence. And we forget again that our problems are all connected. So sometimes it takes somebody like you to come along and remind us. Here's this issue, and be like, oh yeah, that is the issue too. You know. So we form a union, we form a bond, we form a brotherhood and sisterhood to address it. And I've met some pretty dynamic and special individuals, man. So I'm hopeful, man.
Yeah, that's what's up.
We gonna do. The question is, we gonna do it. The question is, you ask who gonna do it. We gonna do it. You know what I'm saying? So
it has to be, because those protectors of status quo, they ain't gonna do it.
Nah, and people aren't afraid to say what it is anymore. People are vocal, people are educated, and they are pushed with that sincere love of our people, man.
Yeah.
So we're saying what it is. We calling out the bootlickers. We calling out the people who taking up space. We calling out our enemies, and that's what we need to do.
Yeah.
So just as we are calling out our problems, if there's individuals, even if they look like us, we calling out the problems, man.
Yep. And we have to. You had mentioned a second time that you felt nurtured in the education space.
The second time it was a black man. I've never had, up until that point, I never had a black teacher. Never, ever. So it's ironically, I don't recall a summer in my junior high school and high school years not attending summer school. Never. And so I was attending summer school, and we had to take classes at this one school, and it was an individual named Mr. Battle. Man, I've never not only had a black teacher, but I've never had this representation of a black man ever in my life. The brother was so intelligent, and he focused on history, and what he shared with us was so empowering. Man, yeah. So it was just his delivery, it was just his content, it's just what he shared with us was enough that I felt poured into. So those were those only 2 times. And a black woman and a black man.
And it's interesting when they talk about like representation matters,
it
right?
Does.
And I mean, just from the short description of Mr. Bow, he may not even know he was doing all that, right? He was just being, right? That's just who he is, and the effect that can have. I mean, sometimes I walk into a class and I'm tall, but like the kids would just look up, and I'm like, do I have something on me or whatever? And I realize that some are just in awe for some reason, right? And for them to have a positive male role model, black male role model in their life, for some of them it's different. And so sometimes I have to remind myself, like, like just being is sometimes impactful.
Just being. Right?
And there are so many of us, right, that are doing like positive, great things. And I wish we could develop a mechanism where we could support each other in our work in a more systematic, continuous way, because the intersectionality of all of our work is, I mean, like education to healthcare to the criminal justice system. Like nothing works in isolation, or these problems don't work in isolation, right? Poverty is a huge, poverty affects everything, right? And so if the problems don't work in isolation, how can the people working on the solutions? Why do we work in isolation so much of the time, right? So I wish we could really figure out how to more consistently collaborate.
I was thinking the same thing. I was really thinking the same thing, and I've been developing relationships with people, and that's the crux of it, these relationships, in terms of our ability to move the ball, move our agenda forward. But I was thinking about the same thing, and I've been more intentional in my everyday now, reaching out to individuals, because in my personal life, I go where however I can help. You know what I'm saying? I'm not above picking up a box, pushing the broom forever. For anybody. But how can I be more impactful in the work that really matters? And so if it's just making a connection with 2 people that I think, you need to meet this brother. You know what I'm saying? Or establishing a database. A spreadsheet of individuals doing the work, keeping contact, and having meetings one-on-one, seeing what your initiatives are, and going to support. Actually, I feel more at home at community events than anything. I just love just going, supporting, and being in the midst of community and good, positive things going. And sometimes I hurt myself because I wish I had the capacity to, aid and support everything myself. But we don't have. We only have 24 hours a day.
And that's why I realized. I'm starting to realize this a little later in life in terms of the importance of our relationships, right? Because we actually can't be everywhere at once. And so but you have so many like-minded people
Yeah.
who are everywhere,
Yeah.
right? And the time that came that we started to coordinate our activities, right? Coordinate our work, like the power that we actually have, I think is gonna be undeniable.
Straight up. Siafu.
Is it, one more question actually? How do you think? What do you think schools could have done differently to have provided you and others with a different trajectory? Right? What do you think schools would have needed to have done to cut that pipeline to prison?
Just simply operating from a position of compassion and care and concern, and asking what is wrong and how can we support. Be more engaging not only with the student but the parents or the family. And oftentimes the engagement seems to be, somebody's getting in trouble. Or it causes parents to go out of their way to be involved, to take off of work and do all of this type of stuff. But taking them more effort and being more proactive and linking the parent with the progress of the student, but having a real intimate relationship with the student, where the student doesn't feel like I'm a student, but I'm a part of this community. You know what I'm saying? I'm a part of a system that is really pouring into me and helping me understand that this is about setting me up in life for success. I'm just thinking I'm going to, this arduous thing, this school.
Yeah, it's oftentimes like it seems unrelated.
Yes.
Right? It's like I have a life, and then I go in this building for a couple times, and I can't wait to get out.
Yes.
What's the connection?
Yes.
So much of the time I've been pushing, like, listen, we have to make learning real.
Yes.
And that's what I'm talking about, even jumping on that school bus and going places all the time and saying, listen, this is what educated people do. Right? They work in a whole bunch of different places. And so you can see that connection. You're not just here to go through some drills. Right? You're here to start a career path, right? A life path about things that you're passionate about things that can actually make you money, that can help you support yourself and your family. And sometimes it's like but to some extent, like, we know this, right? So when I go to schools and they haven't taken a field trip for the whole semester, right? The work is just about the work, but there's no reference or application to the world outside. There's nothing authentic about the work. I'm like I'm bored.
Yeah.
Like, why would a student relate to any of this?
Yeah. It feels like it just, they wrote stuff or it just feels like the systems of indoctrination and not empowerment. You know what I'm saying? So
indoctrination versus empowerment.
Yes. Because that's why you educate. And educate, it means to bring out, not necessarily impose, but bring out a natural ability, the natural path. You know what I'm saying? That's what we're supposed to be doing, empowering children. But sometimes we forget and make it about us. You know what I'm saying? But it's simply about, if you're an educator, if I'm an educator, I know it is my job to nurture and pour into this blossoming flower, right? I am a gardener at this point, you know what I'm saying? My job is to bring it up, but we just like this, just throwing water and see it, you know what I'm saying? Not tripping on the weeds, and nothing. We just,
just throwing a splash of water.
Oh, he's gonna take the water, get the rain gonna take care of it. This requires a lot of attention and energy.
Yeah, I was just arguing with somebody from the teachers union, and I'm like, listen, as a teacher and and part of the teachers union, you have to be for advocating for the rights and privileges of teachers and students.
Yes.
We are not in the business of making iPhones, right? Yeah. We're in the business of making better people.
Yes.
So your job has to be, how can you advocate for yourself and not the student on which your job depends?
Yeah.
There wouldn't be a teachers union without students.
Yeah.
So how can we not advocate for and pour into both? And sometimes I realize that a lot of adults, a lot of the teachers, sometimes they don't think they're great.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And so sometimes I'm like, we have a dual problem. like not only don't they believe in the greatness of our kids, they don't believe in the greatness of themselves. Like, how can you ask them to start talking about the greatness of children when they don't even see themselves as capable of greatness?
So we're talking about investment, right? So it's weird. Like, I don't understand. Like, not in terms of education, right? So you have a system. You go to grade 1 through 12, and you go to college, right? And I don't believe like the teachers themselves are poured into enough, invested in enough, and paid enough. Right? So what happens if you poured into the teachers, right? You know that these are the gatekeepers. You know that these are nurturing your children. And what if you treated them like that? What if you really believe that, and it showed in how that? And I don't know why teachers 1 to 4, knowing the challenges they face, why aren't those teachers invested in enough and giving comparable salaries to college professors and stuff? Why?
Minimum salary should be $60,000. Minimum salary should be $60,000. Listen, I've been an educator. I've been a coach. I've been a principal. I've been a dean. I've been a CEO of schools. The hardest job I ever had was a teacher. The hardest, hands down. As a CEO, as a dean, when I get thirsty or I want to go to the bathroom, I say, I'm gonna come back right back, and I can go to the bathroom. I can say, I'm tired. I'm gonna take a 15-minute break. I can do. As a teacher, you got 30 kids. There's no break. There's no break. And you go home. There's phone calls you have to make. There's grades you have to do. There's plans you have to create. It is like you're like on.
Yeah.
Like all the time, like all week. There is very few chances you get to just be.
And it's not like we don't know. Like, they've made Hollywood movies.
Yeah, right.
Where the hero, the guy is this teacher that pours into kids. They take their paycheck and they pour into classes, and they don't have the budget, but they make do, and they go to visit the children's houses, and they intervene in violence, and they champion that teacher on screen, but in real life,
right, $30,000 a year. What? What do you think? What are you talking about? What are you talking about?
It's like,
$60,000 minimum.
Yeah,
just minimum, out the gate.
What would happen? What would happen if we poured into schools like we do prisons?
Yeah.
What would happen if we poured into teachers like we do police officers? What would we do if we invested in education, or we just held the attitude toward education, man, that is need understanding that it's actually cultivating our kids. It's not a daycare center that we just send the kids to so we can have this over here, or just a system that they have to go through. But this is a process of cultivation and empowering
of life.
Like
life. Again, I just say, listen, people who we're in the business of people. It is entirely different. And sometimes, I wish people would look at kids the way they look at money. Because at the very least, you can't go into a board meeting and say, listen, we're profits are down for the 4th straight quarter, right? Profits are down 2 years running, and keep your job.
Yeah.
Those CEOs will be gone just like that. But you can walk into educational boardrooms month after month, year after year, and say kids aren't learning. Kids are learning less than they were learning last year, and everyone still has their jobs. Everyone keeps. I'm like, man, if you cared for these kids at least as much as you do the dollar, things wouldn't. We wouldn't be in the state that we're in now, because people care a lot more, as I've seen, a lot more about their money than they do children. Because you can fail kids year after year, really decade after decade, and it's just like, it's just how things are. And it's just like, it's just another day. And that always just, I'm like, wow. You see, CEOs cannot CEOs of businesses that have a profit motive cannot walk into their board meetings quarter after quarter and talk about, oh, we're on the decline, and they're just gonna chill and they're just gonna keep their job. It doesn't happen. People are like, what are you talking about? Well, something needs to change.
Yeah.
But no one says that when you're talking about people.
Yeah.
Like, how do we value money so much that you're gonna demand change for money?
Then that's another thing. That's another aspect. Although we don't have time, and just one of the downsides of living in a capitalist society. That's just the down of it. And I wish people would just like wake up and recognize that when they tell us this all the time, we live in a capitalist society. So what that means, money is everything. Wealth and material is everything above life. That's heavy.
That's wild. That's wild, right? And I think for some people, capitalism doesn't have to mean that, right?
Yes.
I mean, people talk about, but if it doesn't have to mean that, then like show us.
Yes.
Right. Like then put your money or put your actions where your mouth is.
Everything supports it. Every single thing supports this. For as long as we've been here, there's been corporations and businesses that have been allowed to poison us. And two, they couldn't be hidden no more. Then they give them a smack on the wrist because of the dollar. Because of the dollar, you got people that sit on benches that's supposed to be agents of justice, send people to prison for dollars. There's been judges that get caught selling kids to juvenile detentions because they're getting kickbacks.
I remember it was either Pennsylvania or New York, like maybe a couple of years ago. This judge has sent hundreds and hundreds of kids, and he was getting paid.
Yes.
He was getting paid for every single one of them that he sent to this jail. And they could have averted, they didn't have to go to jail, but he was getting kickback from each and every one.
Absolutely. If it wasn't about money, then our healthcare would be more affordable, and people wouldn't be dying or denying healthcare and dying for the smallest things and just not having to. So it's all about money.
I was born in Ghana. I moved when I was 2, but I took my kids and we went back there a couple of years ago. And we went to the slave castles, and they took us in the slave dungeons, and you saw these like horrible small rooms where they house hundreds of people. And you're like, yo, how could they even fit hundreds of people? And these people had to shit there, they had to pee there, they had to menstruate there, they had to eat there for sometimes as long as a month, just like in that same place. And I was just like how or why would you ever treat human beings like this? Why would that ever be okay? And it was like, and that's when I realized like the power of money. I was like, money made it all okay. If they weren't making money from it, they wouldn't have done it. And I was like, wow, like what money would allows people to do.
Yeah.
And hey, I'm gonna borrow it because if it's that powerful, hey, can I borrow that power of money? Can you loan some of that to our kids? Yeah. Can you loan some of that care and concern to people? Man, that's when I realized the power of money. I was like, because it's almost unbelievable that like you would treat that you treat a dog.
That's been the root of it. And I've been fortunate enough to kind of separate or have less reliance on like material things in favor of embracing just my humanity and the humanity of other people, because that's the thing that often gets in the way, and it causes us to reduce people. So I just think, back to your question, like I think for those educators, man, what I just needed was just somebody to really embrace my humanity. I say this all the time in different spaces, just embracing humanity, but to be more compassionate, be more care, concern for me, and just work to empower me, have an interest in my being, and not just see me as a number or a student within his system that just has to be herded through the system, but nurtured. Yeah.
And I think, and to me, that's when people talk about racism and everything. I'm like, listen, at the crux of it, racism is a denial of humanity.
Yeah,
absolutely. You see color and you've attached all these other things to it because you're not seeing that they're human beings. And for me, when I go into schools, I'm like, listen, if you really saw the humanity of kids, you would treat them like your own. And if my kid came home and he couldn't read or he couldn't count, I'll be like, oh no, because I love him, because I care for him, because I know that these skills have actual consequence. I'm like, oh no, you're gonna learn, right? How to read. You're gonna learn how to do basic math, right? I'm gonna provide these references for you because you need to see what life is. If I see you as a person, and again, a lot of these people, I've told people many times, like, listen, this is racist. And they're like, oh my God, like, Asher, what are you, like, how are you, I'm black, like, how is this racist? Or I'm white and I care, I love these black people. Like, it's like, listen, you can say that, but your actions say very different. My little girl's upstairs, there's just no way she can come home with, like, bad grades or like or she couldn't read or she was lacking some like serious skill that I know is in her best interest in the future. I'm just gonna let it rock.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't care for her, right? Either one, I don't care for her, or two, I don't believe in her. So if I don't think she can do it, I'm like, oh, well, she's trying her best. And she can't read, but hey, maybe she can climb up to manager at a fast food joint one day. Yeah. Like either I don't care or I don't believe, and especially that belief part, I think, goes to really a lack of belief in the humanity of our children.
Yeah, that's what's missing.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it, man. I appreciate
you. Bro.
I appreciate you coming, man. Thank you. Yeah, thanks, man.
Oh, no problem, man.
All right, look.